Just don't do this one this weekend. I preparated my sermon. I was preparating this week.
Here's another one.
As I was preparating.
All right, last one. Boom, boom, rocka, rocka. We're going to knocka-knocka you off your rocka, rocka.
Yes, that's mine.
I don't remember that, but it was this year. It was April 14th, 2024.
I do remember that one. I was sitting in the front row.
There's been a lot of good ones in
Yeah,
2024.
this has been a great year for Johnnyisms.
You're listening to the Restoration Podcast, conversations of hope and healing. Join us as we talk about subjects dealing with ministry, faith, everyday life, and other hot topics. Our prayer is that these conversations bring encouragement to your life.
Well, today we finally have the boss, Pastor Johnny, on the Restoration Podcast. Welcome,
Hey, I'm glad to be here.
officially.
My first time.
Yep.
Actually, we did one earlier, back when we were doing a prayer thing earlier in the year. But
Right. And that wasn't a true thing. That was kind of a spontaneous thing. And so for people listening and or watching, the reason why Pastor Johnny can't really do this is because we tend to record these on Thursdays. And Thursday is usually the day when he is prepping his sermon, correct?
yep, Thursdays are the day that I try to set that aside to have an uninterrupted day to study and pray and get ready for Sundays.
Yeah.
Knock that out of the way, so I'm not dealing with it throughout the weekend.
Mm-hmm. And the reason you're available today is because this guy is preaching this coming Sunday.
Yeah, this is Scott's Sunday in our series on a man named Noah. So it's Scott's weekend to preach.
Yeah. I got a very encouraging comment from Aaron on Sunday. He said,
What did I say?
after third service, you looked at me and you said, good luck following up, Pastor Johnny.
Oh, yeah.
I said,
It was
"Thanks."
great. It was really good. I'll be honest, the first time we discussed this, and you'll remember, the preacher team got together, and you're like, we're going to do a man named Noah. I was like, guys, there's not a lot of material here. And then Pastor Ben turned to me and said, well, this will stretch you and make you better. And then Pastor Johnny's like, that's what I was going to say. And it did. It was good. I learned a lot that I didn't know before. So
There's a lot to cover in chapters 6 through 10.
Mm-hmm.
A whole lot of information there, and what was going on with Noah and his family and in the world. And it's
yeah.
I 30 plus years of ministry, never preached on Noah.
Mm-hmm.
Read the story, knew the story, but never preached on it. So it's good to dig into it and pull out some of the treasures and the nuggets that's buried in there.
The type of preaching we do when we do a series like this, where we break down a passage or chapter, what is that term? There's a term for that, correct?
Expository preaching.
Expository preaching, where you just go and you break down the passage.
You exegete the passage, you pull out what's in there, which is actually, there are different kinds of preaching. There's expository, there's topical,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's just people grabbing stuff out of the air, But
That's,
the best preaching, in my opinion, is when you do expository, when you actually take a text and you break it down and you dig into it and you unpack what's there.
You get the most out of it. And that really is, it really gives you the most out of that text. A lot of people just do their daily reading and don't really dive in. When we do a series like this, I think it really helps people in their personal time as well. And the preacher, like I said, I learned a lot from that I didn't know otherwise. But thanks for being here today.
I'm glad to be here.
We'll try not to keep you for too long. I forgot to set the timer, so I'm already off to a terrible start. But I wanted to start with something kind of fun. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay. I wanted to play a little game. Is that all right?
Yeah.
This is a game that we're going to call Johnnyism,
Johnnyism.
or not a Johnnyism.
I said one last night. I'm trying to remember.
You did. Let me get my notes here.
Yeah, I was trying to say motherly.
Yes, and you said, now, Sean, the bass player, and I were sitting in the front, and we heard two different ways. So you tell me the incorrect word. Did you say mamaly, or did you say mamaling, like modeling?
I said the first one.
Mamaly.
Mamaly. Yeah.
Can you please explain what that means, or what you were trying to say?
Yeah, I have to go back and remember what I was talking about. I was talking about motherly advice, and I said mamaly.
Yeah. Yeah, it was great.
And I also said, somebody's in the audience said, write that down. And I told them, yep, that someday when I publish that book of Johnnyisms, it's going to be a #1 bestseller in Sioux City.
So for those listening, some people aren't attenders of our church. Johnnyisms are when Pastor Johnny gets excited when he's preaching or speaking, and he just kind of fumbles on his words, as we all do, but not all of us are being recorded while we preach every week. And so our executive pastor, Pastor Bill, has a note on his phone, and he keeps track of them all. Yes. And it's a very long list.
Yes, it is. Well, he's been around 16 years, right. So he's heard me preach a lot of sermons.
And what's great is sometimes we don't even catch them. sometimes we come in on staff meeting, which is Tuesday, and Pastor Johnny's like, "Did y'all catch what I said?" And we're like, "No." And your wife she usually catches those too.
We're just used to it by now.
And so, anyway, Scott and I are going to go back and forth, and all you got to do is say Johnnyism or not a Johnnyism.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to get some music, kind of set the tone here. Just a little, get you
right.
thinking. All right. If you get it correct, you're going to hear the sound.
Okay.
If you get it wrong, you're going to hear the sound. Got it? All right. All right, here we go. Number 1. For the entire fulfillness.
For the entire fulfillness. Well, that sounds like something I would say, so I'd say it's a Johnnyism.
Correct. And we have dates. That was December 19th, 2021.
Okay.
All right, next.
All right, this one is we all have cracks and we leak.
Yeah, that's certainly a Johnnyism.
Correct. Now, may I ask, can you remember what that context was?
Yeah, I was talking about being refilled with the Holy Spirit, that we all need to be refilled with the Holy Spirit. And I was being spiritual, and of course, the rest of you had your minds in the gutter. So,
Hey, I wasn't here yet for that one, so. Okay, next. I have eyes in the back of my eyes.
I'm going to say that's not a Johnnyism.
You're correct. That was actually an Aaronism. I said that, and my students pointed it out. They have a list of Aaronisms too. Okay, next.
The end times are coming corkerly.
The end times are coming corkily. I'm going to say that's not a Johnnyism.
It is a Johnnyism. Now, Pastor Scott said the incorrect word incorrectly. It's the end times are coming quickerly.
Quickerly. Now, see that?
That
yes.
sounds more like you, right? That was, let's see.
So give me the right. So I got
There
it
you
right.
go. April 7th, 2024. That was very,
That was very recent.
yeah. Some of these
That's
I
when I
remember.
must have been finishing up
King and his kingdom.
Yeah, the Revelation series.
That was a great one. Okay, next. The scriptures walk with it through me.
Oh yes, that's me.
That's correct.
That's a classic.
That's a good one.
I've heard Pastor Bill say that one multiple times.
Yeah, he likes that. Okay, next.
Sticks and stones may bake my bones.
No.
You said that.
Oh, I did.
Yeah, this was on May 12th, 2024.
Oh, that was even recent.
I'll give you more of the quote. You actually said, "Sticks and stones may bake my bones." You realized what you said, and you said, "Well, actually, it may do that too." And then you just kept going.
Oh my goodness.
Okay, is it my turn?
Yes.
Has it been raining, or is the road already dry?
Oh yeah, that's certainly mine.
That's a classic too.
That was that
Can
one.
you share that
That was a
background on
long
that one?
time ago. Yeah, let's see that story on that one.
One of the
back-
OG.
Yeah, when we were living in Georgia, and us and our friends Mike and Gina Hobbs had gone to this water park, and we were driving back home, and Mike and I were in my truck, and it had been raining, and so what I meant to say was it rained, but now the road is already dry.
Huh.
But you heard the statement.
Has
So-
it been raining, or is the road already?
Yeah, and so my friend Mike Hobbs, we were talking about that over 30-something years ago. He still
I was gonna say that.
Brings
He
that
still
up
brings
all
it
the
up. That was one of the OG Johnnyisms.
that's the original.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, 2 more.
All right. This one is bring forth your tithe and offering.
Bring forth. That's you.
It is.
Correct. That's what Pastor Scott said, and we gave him a hard time about that.
I still get a hard time. But the next week when Pastor Matt went up to do it, and
used the same word.
He said the exact same thing.
Bring forth your.
Just don't do this one this weekend. I preparated my sermon. I was preparating this week.
Here's another one.
As I was preparating.
All right, last one. Boom, boom, rocka, rocka. We're gonna knocka-knocka you off
Yes,
your
that's
rocka,
mine.
rocka.
Yes, that's mine.
I don't remember that, but it was this year. It was April 14th, 2024.
I do remember that when I was sitting in the front row.
Wow, there's been a lot of good ones in 2024.
This has been a great year for Johnnyism. So hey,
I think you've embraced the Johnny.
great job, great job.
We need to get that book published.
Yeah, I agree. Those are great, and it was hard to even narrow down and pick which ones for today. There's a lot.
That'll bring when that's published, that'll bring a lot of smiles to people's face every day.
agree.
I'm writing a book and don't even realize it.
Johnnyisms, yeah. Well, you're here today, and there's so many things we can talk about because you have been in ministry full time for how long now? How long have you been doing ministry?
1986, I started at my first church in Georgia in May of, graduated in April, started there in May of 86.
42, does that sound
coming up
right?
on, 86 would be, no, it's 38 years.
Sorry, I went the wrong way.
Maybe 40 years. And
Yeah, and you've done a lot, and what we've done with people who have been on here for the first time is they kind of shared their ministry history, so where they started, maybe where they got called, maybe how they grew up, and that alone can take up like an hour, I know. But we've been there's a specific couple in our church, younger couple, who have asked, when is Pastor Johnny going to share his story? We did a series last summer called Share Your Story. Every staff member preached on their testimony. And when you came back from vacation, this couple was like, so is he going to share his story? Because I don't know it. And I'm like, oh, so, and then you may say, well, I've been here for 16 years. I've shared it over that time. Well, we've got nuggets, and some of us just want to piece it together. Even me, if someone were to ask me to put your story, I don't think I could. And I'm not only your worship pastor, but your son-in-law. But so tell us a little bit about your upbringing and your history of ministry.
Well, my upbringing was I was raised in Gainesville, Georgia. My parents were Jake and Frances Helton. I had a brother. His name was Terry. He was killed in an automobile accident when I was 11. He was 17 in 1974. My dad was a small business owner. He was in the restaurant business for about 25 years. And then he got out of that and had a used car business for a while. Then he got out of that. Back up, he had a little country gas station, grocery store, little convenience store business for a while. Then he got out of that and got into, had a used car business for a few years. And then he got out of that and did construction. And then in 1980, my parents divorced. My dad moved to Phoenix, Arizona to kind of get a new start and went out there. Then he started a business doing lawn service, and he was there from 80 to 86, and then in 86 he moved back to Georgia. Soon after he moved back to Georgia, he passed away. So that's kind of my, family history there. My mother passed away in 1983. My dad died in 1986. So by the time I was 22 years old, I had lost all of my family members. I got saved in 1978, and the way that all came about was my family did have a Christian background. My grandfather, my mom's dad, was a Pentecostal preacher. His name was Rufus Gaddis, my Papa Gaddis, and he was an itinerant preacher. So he worked on the railroad. That's what he did as a full-time job. Worked for the railroad, Georgia Midland. He always had a saying, I worked for Georgia Midland, and I'm still a piddlin'. That was always his little line there. But he traveled all over the North Georgia mountains preaching and little small churches. Churches didn't have pastors, filling in for pastors when they were on vacation or gone. And so my mother grew up in church. In fact, my mother used to sing on the radio with my pastor, who later became my pastor's wife, but they were friends growing up, and my mother used to sing on the radio. So my parents had a Christian background, but after they got married, they, got out of church, and so they were Creasters. They would go to church on Christmas and Easter, so we went to this particular church on Easter Sunday in 1978, and it's actually my pastor, who his wife and my mother grew up together, because they had great singing. It was a great church, and so they went, and I met the pastor, and he's kind of took an interest in me, and so summer rolled around, and he kept inviting me to go to youth camp, and I didn't want to go because I'm like, well, I want to go spend a week with a bunch of Christians at a camp. I didn't know what to expect. Camping for me was going up in the North Georgia mountains with a camper next to a river, fishing, sitting around a campfire, all that kind of stuff. So I finally gave in. He just always said he was kind of a hound of heaven. He beat me down. But I went, and I really needed to go because at that time in our life, my parents' marriage was in a lot of trouble, and alcoholism was in our family, domestic abuse, that kind of stuff. And so I could use a week, break from them.
Right.
So I went to camp and didn't know what to expect. And on Wednesday night, I sat in the back of the tabernacle, and it was hot, and I was ready to go get out of there and go to the snack shack, get a hot dog and Coke, and flirt with the girls. But the guy was giving the sound. I don't even remember who the guy was speaking or what his message was, but I just remember the Holy Spirit started gripping my heart, and I realized for the first time I needed to accept the Lord as my Savior. So I went down and got saved and gave my heart to Jesus on that Wednesday night. And we came back from camp, and I didn't have a spiritual, I didn't have a support system.
Right.
But thank the Lord, the pastor of my church, who became the pastor of my church, he was a pastor of the church I started going to, took a real interest in me, and so he made sure that I got to church every week. So for the next 3 years, this guy would drive 18 miles every Sunday one way to pick me up and take me to church. So he'd come down to pick me up. Back in those days, you still had Sunday school, so he'd come pick me up like at 8 o'clock in the morning. I'd go to church, be at church all day. Sunday morning, I'd spend Sunday with he and his family, and then be at church that night. And that was back in the days when Sunday night church started at 7:30, and would go to 10:30. I wouldn't get home
Yeah.
till like, and he would drive me home. And he didn't do that every week because he couldn't, but there were other people in our church that lived down where I lived that made
They
sure
would help too.
Yeah. So I had a good spiritual support structure there from people in the church. Went back to camp the next year, which God called me into the ministry, baptized me in the Holy Spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so that would have been 79. And then I graduated high school in 1981 and went off that fall to Bible college, Southeastern College at that time. Now it's called Southeastern University. Had never stepped foot on the campus. In fact, wasn't even planning on going because I had moved out to Arizona to be with my dad. I didn't apply for school. I didn't have any money. And my pastor called me about 2 weeks before school started, and he said, "Hey, are you planning on going to school?" I'm like, "Well, I'd like to, but I don't have any money. I haven't
afford it."
applied." And I said, "I'll go in January." And he's like, "No." He said, "You need to go now, or you won't go." I'm like, "Well, I don't have any money." And so he said, "Let me make some phone calls." So he called me back in a few minutes, and he said, "Look, this is what you need. I've got an application on the way, application packet." He said, "You need X number of dollars for your first semester, and for the year, for the first semester, I think it was." And he said, "Talk to your dad." And so I talked to my dad. My dad said, "Do you really want to go?" And I said, "Yes." So my dad borrowed the money, and he said, "Here's your first semester." He said, "I'll pay for your first semester," and he said, "and I'll buy your plane ticket." And he said, "But after that, you got to figure it out."
Mm-hmm.
So I packed up everything that I owned in a duffel bag. I got a flight and went off I had a girl, and this guy, the girl from my home church, picked me up at the airport in Tampa, Florida. I'd never set foot on this campus. I got there that night. I was lost as a bird in a rainstorm, and didn't like it at first because I was away from home, didn't know anybody. Here I'm living in a 12 by 12 room with some guy that I don't know. I'm using a community bathroom and showers, all those crazy things. But anyhow, showed up with $400 in my pocket that I'd saved, and then a check from my dad, and so there I was at school, and got through the first semester, and graduated 5 years later. And met my wife, Angie, while I was there, which was a great benefit.
Mm-hmm.
And the amazing thing was that God helped me. I had a full-time job, full-time, part-time, but I worked pretty much full-time while I was in school, carried a full load. And when I walked across that stage in April of '86, all I owed was $400.
Wow.
And to this day, I still look back on that, and I don't know, because I didn't have any help. I mean, my dad paid for my first semester, and he said, you got to figure it out after that. And so, but God provided the money, and I walked across, and all I owed was $400. So left there, and Angie and I got married in 1984, and we lived for another year and a half there in Lakeland, graduated in '86, and then we moved to South Georgia, took a youth pastor job there at Tifton First Assembly. Wonderful place. I learned a lot there. It was one of those places where you dove off the diving board and you had to learn to swim.
First job. Yeah.
Pastor Stokes that I worked for, I'm very grateful to him that he took a chance on me.
Mm-hmm.
Made some wonderful friends there, still friends with many of those people today. It was a difficult season, place to work. It was just hard ground to plow through.
Right.
I was the third youth pastor in 3 years, or we were, and so there was a lot of skepticism in the church and in the youth group about a youth pastor staying. And we stayed there 4.5 years, and then felt that the Lord was wanting us to resign, and so we did. We took a step of faith in June of '90, and no door opened. And so from the June of '90 till January of '91, we were not in ministry. We were still living there in Georgia. I took a job working for a mortgage broker, which I still laugh about that because I had no idea what I was doing. Angie didn't sign a teaching contract, so she was working for a cotton broker right down the street. So cotton broker, mortgage
Interesting
broker.
year there. Yeah.
Those were just jobs that were a means to an end, but they met our need.
That Tifton, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Youth pastor job, was that the church that also had a school? Is that correct?
Yep, had a school, and it was one of those churches where, like I said, I was hired to be the youth pastor, but I did everything from. I didn't do it all the time, but we had a daily radio broadcast, so from time to time we'd have to do that. We had a school, had about 250 kids in it. Every Wednesday I had to do chapel.
Chapel.
And we actually had more than 200, about a total of 250, 300 kids that would be from kindergarten through 6th grade.
What was that like?
It was crazy. It was fun. It was fun being around. There was
course,
always
yeah.
life in there
Yeah.
every day. But I had to do chapel every Wednesday for like 250 3, 4, and 5-year-olds.
That Lord was tilling the ground, preparing you for preaching in front of,
And then
age white.
then I had 30 minutes. Then I had to do chapel for 1st through 6th grade. That was never discussed in my contract. And had to drive the school bus, take kids to the library, take them to the park, hospital visits, nursing home visits. It was just one of those places where you just did everything.
Right.
And then we left there, and we had that 9-month period where we were not working in a church, but it was a good season of refreshing, and because I had some spiritual healing I needed to do, and I was mentally and physically worn out. And then in January of '91, I got a call from a pastor in Dallas, Texas, or Duncanville, Texas, Dr. Galen Clonch, and he contacted me, and make us. Fast forward the story, we ended up going to Duncanville, Texas in 1991. Never
Homeland
been
of
to Texas.
Texas.
Yeah. Never been to Texas. Well, I'd driven through Texas, but I didn't know anybody there.
Yeah.
And we ended up spending 17 years there at the church. When we first went, it was called Memorial Assembly of God, but then in 2000, they changed the name to Crossroads of Life. It was a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful 17 years of ministry and experience, and God opened a lot of great doors for me in the community. I was heavily involved in the community there, many things. The district involved there, doing lots of things in the district office with the youth department. And then in 2007, Pastor Clonch got elected to be the assistant superintendent of the North Texas district. So that started the ball rolling. I knew that I'd been an associate for 21 years, so it was time for me to make the next step. In 2004, I stepped out of the youth pastor role there at Crossroads after 13 and a half years, and I stepped into a senior associate role.
Right.
Did that for 3.5 years. And I was hoping that I'd be the next pastor there at Crossroads, but that didn't work out. But God opened the door for us to come to Iowa, and the way we ended up here was it'd been 17 years since I'd done a resume. I didn't know, I was kind of lost, and so I contacted a friend of mine in the national office, and I said, look, I'm looking to transition. Do you know of any churches looking for a pastor? And he said, I got a guy that I know that he knows everybody, and I'm going to send your resume to him. And sure enough, he sent it.
That's a good guy to know.
Yeah, his name's Dick Hardy. And little did I know that this church, at that time, that the senior pastor here, Tom Jacobs, had gotten elected to be the district superintendent here in Iowa, and that this church had hired Dick Hardy as their consultant to help them find a pastor. So Dick called me one day and said, hey, I've got this church in Iowa that's looking for a senior pastor, and blah, blah, this, blah, blah, that. Are you interested? And I'm like, well, sure. So one thing leads to another, get a phone call, have a phone interview, have another phone interview. Then I get asked to come up for a face-to-face interview in January of '08, and then Angie and I go home, and then they called us back the next week and said, we'd like to bring you up here to try out. So we came back in February of '08 and was here for the weekend, and they elected us as senior pastors. And then so we left and went back to Dallas, resigned our church, sold our house, packed up all of our belongings, transitioned our family, and arrived here in the first weekend of April of '08, and here we are.
Been here ever
16
since.
years later.
That's amazing. What's amazing to me about your story is I know there's got to be multiple times, and like I said, we could talk for hours on this, but what's so significant to me is your story is such an example of lean out on your own understanding. Because I'm assuming you probably thought fresh out of college that you'd be in Georgia for a longer time because that was your home state, right? You got
Where my family was.
Yeah.
Thought I'd go there. That was my home district. I'd go back and stay there. But then the Lord picked us up and moved us to Texas, and then we were there 17 years, and I certainly thought, well, our kids are born here. This is where our family is. We have roots in this church. Our kids have roots here.
Yeah.
But when you're in the Lord's army,
Yeah.
you get new marching orders.
Yes.
And so Iowa was certainly not on our radar.
It's not on most people's. Let's be honest. It's not on most people's.
Wasn't on mine either.
Yeah, it's not a destination state, truly, but it's been a good 16 years here at the church, and it was a good move for our family. And I didn't know anybody in Iowa. I'd never been to Iowa. The only thing I knew about Sioux City was that there was a plane that crashed here in 1980.
They still talk about that.
1989.
Yeah.
And so I know I did not make this happen. I didn't have somebody in my corner saying, hey, you need to check this guy out. They did have a consultant, but he didn't know me.
Right.
very well. So, the things that kept me steady in the early years here when it was really challenging was, number one, I knew that God called me here, God brought me here, so those are the things that kept me steady.
Yeah.
Nobody was manipulating things for me.
I think a lot of people who are younger and either studying to be in ministry or they're fresh in ministry need to remember what you just said, that our marching orders change. Whether that's in the church you get hired at initially, perhaps you'll get asked to do things that you initially didn't think you would be, or the Lord has a way of relocating us, and it can be very difficult and kind of scary. You were very similar, correct? Because when you came out of Rhema in Oklahoma, did you think you'd stay in Oklahoma? Did you even know?
When I was done with Rhema, I was pretty sure I was going to stay in Oklahoma and serve there for a long time. And then the Lord told me and my wife, as we were praying, she knew we were going to move to Iowa. And I was like, well, I need to hear it for myself. I need my marching orders. And so I just prayed, and the Lord said, I want you to go. At the time, we were Morningside Assembly of God. He said, I want you to go and be an answer to prayer of Morningside Assembly of God. And, I thought I was just going to come and serve under the previous youth pastor here and serve his vision. And then, the Lord had different plans.
Right. Yeah, that's just how the ministry works.
Yeah.
And I'm in the same camp of I did not think I'd be in Iowa. If you had, traveled from today back in time to me in high school and said, you're going to be first of all, if you had just said you're going to be a full-time worship pastor I would have said, stop right there. No way. Right. And then if you had completed that sentence, Sioux City, Iowa, I wouldn't even be able to point to Iowa on a map probably, because I was raised in Texas. But all these things, the Lord has a way of working them out, because if you had not relocated this is funny, if you had not gone from Duncanville, Texas to Sioux City, Iowa, I would have never met your daughter. We became married. So it all works out, It's not, and that's another thing to keep in mind if you're in ministry. It's not just, your story that gets impacted by saying yes to the call. It's other things that happen. The Lord's plan, that's just how he works.
Dovetailing on that about, our marching orders change, and if we had not come here, that, certain things wouldn't have happened. And so when we just knew that we were going to be coming here, we were visiting with our former pastor and his wife, and Tori at that time was 14. Tyler would have been 10. And so Tori would be transitioning from junior high to high school, and Tyler would be moving from elementary to intermediate school. So we knew if we were going to make a change, now would be a good time, because I wanted my kids wherever, like Tori started high school, I wanted Tori to be able to finish high school there, and the same for Tyler. And I remember Galen saying to Tori and Tyler, he said, I know that you guys may not understand this because you're kind of young, but if this call is right for your mom and dad, then it's right for you also. And that's proven out. Tori and Tyler both excelled really well here in Sioux City. They got opportunities they may not have gotten where we used to live.
Right.
And then they both ended up going to Evangel. There's a good chance if we'd have stayed in the Dallas area, they would have gone to, Southwestern, which was a great school too. But Tyler wouldn't have met, he wouldn't have met Laura, and you wouldn't have met, Tori wouldn't have met you. So
I'm forever thankful that you did that.
So God has, hey, I went off to Bible college, and I was hoping that I'd find somebody, a wife, but man, my Angie's from, we didn't know each other. We weren't in the same state. She was from West Virginia. She had been planning to go to Southeastern all her life. I started planning on going to Southeastern 2 weeks before it started.
You just showed up. Yeah. That's funny, because Tori moved out of the state I was from, and that's how we met.
Yeah.
Sometimes the Lord has a way of asking you to do things.
At that time, we were only 4 hours apart.
Yeah, we were closer had you stayed there, but we would have probably never met.
Yeah.
This is how the Lord works.
Because there's two different districts, and
correct.
4 hours away.
What is kind of funny is we both attended National Fine Arts or General Council in Phoenix, Arizona. So we were in the same room one time.
In 2011.
Yeah, but that doesn't. Obviously, we didn't know each other. But okay, so you've been here for 16 years as lead or senior pastor. We recently, our church rolled out a 10-year vision plan, correct? Not 5. 10,
started out as 5, but then as I got to look at him, like, man, that would be very ambitious to accomplish all that in 5 years. So, yeah.
So you are the man that the Lord has placed here, and you are the spiritual leader here. And so we trust in your guidance and leadership. And if the Lord reveals something to you, we believe it's from the Lord. And so can you talk a little bit about our 10-year vision plan, any of the parts of that? Well, first of all, the first thing, one of the big things that was on that list was changing the name of our church from Memorial Morningside Assembly to now Restoration Church.
Yeah.
And so what was we've talked about it from behind the pulpit. We had a couple town halls, but you have time here on this platform. How did that begin?
Yeah.
The prompting.
Well, that's a good question. So that actually began, I would say, probably in 2021, when I was taking our staff through Dr. Mark Rutland's National Institute of Christian Leadership.
I remember those.
And we were going through that, and there was a section we were talking about alignment, and he was talking about how that you have to have everything to be in alignment if you want to be productive and be moving together. You've got to have everything in alignment, from your name to your ministries, all those things. And so we actually began as a staff at that time talking about changing our name. But man, when that first came up, I'm like, I could just see that being a balloon that was going nowhere. That was going to bomb because the name has been Morningside for over 50 plus years. And so we talked about it, and we tossed around some names, and Restoration was one of those names, along with some others. Right. And I just really kind of shelved that. We had the conversation, but I really kind of shelved that in the back of my mind. So then that's in 21, 22. 22 was a challenging year for a number of reasons, but coming out of 22, getting ready to go into 23, I was in the fall of the year. I always kind of I began to ask the Lord, give me direction for the next year, and the Lord dropped the word alignment into my heart, and I just wrote it down, alignment, and then align our name, and if we align our name, then we can align our ministries, and I just started writing all these things down, and then so I kind of tucked that back in my mind. It was in my heart. Then I was praying, and the Lord began to drop. After the first year, I was praying about that. Then the Lord began to drop all these things into my heart about the church. And I'm like, actually, it was that fall, I guess. I'm trying to keep my timeline straight. 23, we're in 24, so it's been 22. And then the Lord started giving me all these different things, like a vision for the next 10 years, and I did not want to address that, because if you give a vision for 10 years, then you're committing yourself to 10 more years. I'm not saying I don't want to be here 10 more years, but I am 60 years old.
Right.
And so, I think about...
You don't look 60, by the way.
Thank you very much.
For real.
You don't act 60.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I think about retirement, and anyhow, so I wrote all these things down, and then in June of 23, I felt the Lord say it was time to present this to our board. So in a board meeting in June, at the end of the meeting, after we'd gone through our agenda, I said, I want to talk to you about a vision plan. And I rolled it out, and I said, I just want you to listen. I had it all typed up, gave it to them. I want you to listen. I went through it all, and then there was lots of, if I was judging how they were feeling by their looks in the room, and like, man, this is going nowhere. This is going to bomb.
You thought that?
Yeah, but they were listening intently.
Right.
I was misreading their facial expressions, and so we did talk a little bit about it afterwards. I said, what do you think about this? And there was everything was favorable. The name one did get kind of I saw some like pullback, and
you were expecting that. Yeah.
And so what I asked him, I said, this is June. We usually don't have a July meeting because of vacations. Would you take July and pray about this, and then in August we'll talk about it again. So we came back in August. They had a whole month and a half to think about it, pray about it, and they were all thumbs up. So that's August, September. Then October rolls around, annual business meeting. A couple of board members come off, a couple of new ones that are not in the loop, that don't know what's going on, because this has been a confidential conversation. And so I had to get those 2 new board members, actually 3 new board members caught up. And there was one that I wasn't real sure how they would embrace it, because they've been here, their family's been a part of this church for the 100 years. But this particular board member embraced it, and because of his comments, I know his comments were very weighty and really brought some clarity, and people go, well, that makes sense.
And that was kind of the confirmation that we all needed.
Yep. And so that was October. November, we were discussing it again, and I said, what do we do with this, guys? We just keep kicking it down the road. We want to embrace this. And so they said, well, Pastor, I feel like you probably it would be a good time for you to bring this to the church. So that was November. We're going to do it in December. I didn't want to do it in January. So in February, we had a vision meeting. And came to that vision meeting, and I was really pleased at the number. It was
Very well attended.
165.
A lot of online viewers,
70
too.
people came. I took a lot of time laying out our history because I knew that I figured that if anything, the name change would be the one that I would get maybe the biggest pushback on. So I wanted to lay out some history about how the church started and what we started under. Right. Started under the banner of "We Pray for the Sick."
Yep.
And as I was putting all that together, one day at my house, the Lord dropped three things into my heart, and it was the Lord I know that did this, that kind of encapsulated why we wanted to change the name. We wanted to align with our history. We wanted to align with our reputation, because when I came to Morningside in 2008, I had a lot of people tell me that Morningside's always been known as a place where people can find healing, where hurting people have come from, maybe gotten hurt at other churches, or ministers gotten hurt, they come, got healing, and then went back out into ministry. So we align with our history, which the church started under the banner of "We Pray for the Sick" in 1924. Then we were aligning with our reputation, and then in 21, I was at a conference, and the Lord gave me a word of prophecy for the church where He said, "I'm placing a healing and restoration anointing upon this place." So I said, we want to align with our history, we want to align with our reputation, and we want to align with
who God says we are.
Yep. And then I said, about changing the name, and I didn't get I thought I would get the proverbial.
It was actually,
people began to clap and embrace it. And so it was interesting that out of all the things that I laid out, that the name got the least amount of questions.
Yeah.
It was the other things that got questions.
Which, really quickly to point out at that meeting, what got the most reaction? Do you remember what it was?
Oh, yeah. When I said, hey, at the end of the meeting, I said, just want to give you a little information or a little insight that right out here in front of our church where this four-way intersection is, that they're going to be building a roundabout. And I got these groans that went through the audience.
That's when you heard the, ugh.
Yeah. And people go, I love everything that you talked about tonight except the roundabout. And I was like, well, I don't have anything to do
And
with
that's
that.
the one thing that's out of your control.
That's out of my control.
So,
name change. We wanted to, in this year, celebrate our 100th anniversary, which will be taking place this September. We wanted to, I felt like the Lord wanted us to pay off our debt, and I was looking more starting that in 2025, but it seemed to be a groundswell of people wanting
are in it,
wanting to pay that off sooner, so we've been working towards that. Another goal is to start a Christian counseling center, which we've kind of readjusted our timeline on that. Things are working behind the scenes, but our target time for that now is we want to roll that out in 2026 because we still got to raise money. We've got some other things that have to get done on that, and then we want to plant 5 churches in 5 different cities between now and 2034.
Right.
And those 5 cities are, a couple of them were already target cities: Ottawa, Missouri Valley. The new ones are Sioux Center, Rock Valley, and Cherokee, Iowa. Cherokee, Iowa used to have an Assemblies of God church there many, many years ago, but these other cities have never had one. And they're rural communities, anywhere between 2,000 and 9,000. 9,000 would be the one, would be Sioux Center. And so, that's it. So change our name, celebrate our 100th year, pay off our mortgage, start a counseling center, and plant 5 churches in 5 cities around northwest Iowa.
And again, when we presented this to our congregation at a town hall thing, very well received, all of it. And I think you did a great job in how you presented it. I don't think people realize, it takes a lot of thought and prayer to not only bring up these things, but how you present it as well. And Pastor Johnny was even thinking about the order, which order should I tell these things in or whatever. And but everything was very well received. And I also want to point out back specifically to the name change thing, anyone listening or watching. And again, it's been people have said, yeah, that makes sense. It wasn't just a split decision that we made overnight. It took prayer and it took a while and,
Really since 2021.
Exactly. And you told the board first. It was a whole process. And actually, not just all these things, right? You presented to the board a while ago. It's not just, it's a new year, let's try these things. No, it was a very prayerful.
Yeah, back in 2023. June of 23, I started talking to them about it. And I also called, I've heard said by other people that one of the greatest leadership challenges that any pastor can face is changing the name of their church, especially one that's had a history of a certain name for a number of years. And so I did my homework. I called pastor friends that I knew that had changed the name of their church, and I said, and they all had changed the name of their church for specific reasons. One, their church had a bad name, had gone through a difficult season, and they needed a name change to have a fresh start. Another one, they were going to be going into multi-site, and the name that they had for their church at that time would not work well in
the
other
new
cities.
The new site, yeah.
And God was doing something new there. Another church that I talked with that had the name for probably 100 years. And so his challenge was, he kept saying, you have to have a strong why, strong mission. And so theirs was mission oriented. And so, and ours was mission oriented.
Right. And destination, there's a lot of Morningside things here in Sioux City.
Yeah. And technically we are not in the Morningside area. We're in the Singing Hills area.
Yep.
The old location was the Morningside area. And so we wanted a name that described who we were and not a destination name. Because like you said, we battle against Morningside Lutheran, we don't battle against them, but there are other churches that have the Morningside name, Morningside Lutheran, Morningside Bible,
Morningside Baptist.
there's Morningside University, the list could go on and on.
Yeah.
So we wanted to have a name that was descriptive of who God says that we are. And so that's how we came up with the name Restoration Church.
Pastor Scott, when you got on staff, this was right in the middle of all that, correct?
Yeah.
When your first
Well, when it was shortly after I started that we started talking about it, because Pastor Johnny brought it up in a staff meeting once, and then you kind of filled me in on pre-conversations that you guys had before I was on staff. And then, but I remember when I started, someone was like, I was talking to someone, was like, yeah, I work at Morningside. They were like, Morningside what? Because I didn't realize how many Morningsides there were. And so I had to explain Morningside to somebody, and they were like, oh, okay.
You throw a rock in Sioux City, it hits something called Morningside, something,
Yeah, but let me be clear, the name Morningside has served this church well.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So
Yes.
it never crossed my mind ever up until 2021 about changing the name of this church.
Right.
I mean, when I came here, I had no desire, it was never on my radar to think about changing the name of this church.
Yeah.
So I know how it came about. I know the results. And I saw how smoothly it went. So that is a confirmation to me that it was
Absolutely.
the Lord, that the Lord was in this.
And Iglesia de Restauración, got a nice ring to it in Spanish. I'm just saying.
So smooth.
I like it. But real quickly, we have a few minutes left. You brought up another thing of the 10-year plan was to celebrate our 100 years. That's coming up this September. Can you share a little bit about what's so special about that Sunday, and why is it so special to celebrate 100 year? Why is that such a great milestone for a church?
Well, it's being a church for 100 years, a century. That's number one.
That's significant.
Being in a community, still vibrant,
Yep.
still growing. There are some churches that are 100 years old, and they're much smaller than they were when they were started, or they're just a shell of people
Right.
on the verge of closing their doors. So, but that has not been the case with this church. This church has always been a fixture for 100 years in this community, been a vibrant, growing church. But we are celebrating that. We've set the whole month of September aside. September is not the month that the church started,
Right.
That's the actual birthday month. But we decided to take the whole month of September and celebrate. We'll have a different speaker each month. Some of them will just do a window. Some may have a whole service, but their Sunday will be tying to something that has to do with our mission vision, And then on the 28th, which is a Saturday, we'll be having a celebration dinner.
Right.
In our gymnasium, and that there's really no program for that night other than the simple fact of we're celebrating 100 years as a church community, church family with a meal together. And then on Sunday morning, the 29th, we'll have our 3 services, and that will be the actual celebration day. Choir will be ministering.
Worship choir, yep.
2 of our former pastors, there are only 3 of us still alive, myself, Pastor Tom Jacobs, and Pastor Don Hawkins.
They will be here, correct?
They will be here. They'll be sharing in all 3 services. We've got some videos that we'll be presenting, from congratulation videos, proclamations, those kind of things. It's just going to be a wonderful day of us celebrating the goodness of God. And then I'll wrap it up at the end with a very short message on, challenging us for now is the next 100 years.
The next 100, next centennial.
I'm pretty confident that I will not be here for that one, the next 100 years. But
Be like Noah.
I'm thankful that the Lord gave me the opportunity to be leading this church at its
this
100th,
time, yeah.
100th anniversary. Yeah.
That's awesome. So during this lead up to September, we've asked people who have either been longtime attenders or if they're related to or friends with longtime attenders to kind of bring pictures or clippings and stuff, and we've received
A lot.
quite a bit. Anything stick out that you can think of at the moment?
No, other than that, that is being compiled now, and it's going to be a beautiful, probably 12, 15 pages, could end up being 20 pages, color
Oh yeah, so we're making a booklet is what he's
booklet,
talking about.
Yep, of history of the church. We'll also be have a video that's being put together on the history of the church with interviews. One of the it's going to be so we're going to give them some things that they can take home with them as a memory. But I'm sorry, maybe I didn't fully answer your question.
No, it's okay. There's been people bringing stuff in the office, like pictures and old bulletins and stuff like that, and it's been really cool to read the history.
Yeah.
There was a newspaper clipping about the Spanish church that Pastor Miguel had started here. Like, there's so much that Morningside Assembly has done in the last 100 years. And so very quickly, we tried to discuss this with me, Scott, and Ben, and we did not get this correct. What were the names of our church leading up to Restoration Church? We could not get that right. So
if I could, and I may not get them all right because I don't have the information in front of me, but it started out as I think it started out in 1924. Well, no, it did start out in 1924 down on West 7th with a minister by the name of William Barclay. And if I remember correctly, it was called Glad Tidings Gospel Mission. I think that's what it was called. And then it went from there to, I think it became Central Assembly. And then it went from Central Assembly to Morningside Assembly. And then now Morningside Assembly to Restoration Church. Yeah. And so just to be clear, so anybody that might be listening to this, because one of the questions that came up was, okay, so we're changing our name from Morningside Assembly of God to Restoration Church. Are we leaving the Assemblies of God?
I'm glad you brought that up.
Absolutely not. I'm a company guy. I love the Assemblies of God. We're not taking this church out of the Assemblies of God. If you so the short version of our church name is Restoration Church. The long legal name is Restoration Church of the Assemblies of God. So, but that's a lot of verbiage to put up on a building or to put on a sign. So we are still an Assemblies of God church.
We're still very much part of our fellowship.
Correct.
And we have zero plans of leaving.
Nope.
At least while Pastor Johnny's here, right?
Correct.
Well, before we go, real quick, we asked some people this question, and I have to give you time to let it marinate, I guess. You've done ministry for a long time. Do you have any, like, memorable, funny things that have happened, whether as a youth pastor or on the pulpit or anywhere? We've had quite a number of things that we've heard people share, but anything you can think of that sticks out in your mind?
Yeah, the first one that I would say that sticks out in my mind was the very first hospital nursing home visit that I ever made at my first church, and I went to see a particular person, and they gave me their name, and I went to their room, and I hadn't been at the church more than a month, and I was fresh out of Bible college, and I greeted the individual, and they looked at me with a kind of a strange look on their face, and then they flashed me.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, 80-year-old individual flashed me right there. A little scarred from that, you know.
It's definitely traumatizing.
Still remember that.
And that was your first one?
Yeah, I still remember the person's name. And when I got back to the church, they said, "How did your visits go?" And I said, "Great." Said, "What about so and so?" And I kind of paused, and they started snickering, and I didn't realize that they sent me to see somebody that was had some mental issues, you know. So they broke me in there. I'm sure I have plenty others, you know, that none's just coming to my mind right now, but that was one certainly that still sticks out.
I'm sure as a youth pastor too, students can be kind of unpredictable and.
Sure, yeah, yeah, no doubt. I can say in the 18 and a half years I was youth pastor, I left a couple of kids at some places.
On purpose or?
No,
okay,
it was
all right.
total by accident.
Okay.
You know, but those were scary moments when I realized I'd left a kid somewhere. Fortunately, I wasn't that far away from them to get back to them, and we didn't have cell phones.
Back before cell phones, yeah.
Yeah, so but you know, if I had time to think about it,
of course,
off the moment, that's coming to my mind. But I can just say that yes, ministry is filled with with many, many stories and experiences that you have, and every day in the ministry is different.
It's true.
When you work with people, it's always different. And there's nothing. No 2 days are the same.
It's true. It's very true.
Yeah.
But we're glad you took the time to be here today.
Yeah.
And I don't know about Pastor Scott, can't speak for you, but I'm thankful for your leadership to be underneath you.
Oh, thanks.
I've learned a lot. I've only been doing this for almost 3. Can you believe that? We've been here for almost 3 years, me and Tori.
I'm thankful for that. Glad you came home.
Yeah, that's another story on itself. It is pretty amazing, totally a God thing. But
It was.
thankful for your leadership and for your vision, for not being a pastor that just stays, no vision, no moving forward. I'm thankful to be a part of a church family for that. And I said this before when I was preaching, but when me and Tori were dating and I'd visit Morningside, I would always look forward to that Sunday. And that's true. I'm not just saying that. But I would always look forward to attending because I loved the atmosphere. I loved everything about this church. And little did I know the Lord was going to have me work here 10 years later.
Yeah, never know where you're going to end up. That's true.
Yeah, when we came and visited, I remember we would always come here because this is where Kendra's family goes to church, and so anytime we would come and visit, we would always go to service here. And I remember leaving one Sunday and saying, if we ever moved here, I would definitely want to go here.
Yeah.
It's been a wonderful 16 years. It's been challenging times.
Yes.
Which it doesn't matter where you're at, there would always be challenging
That's good.
times.
Yeah.
And in my early years, I made a lot of mistakes because of rookie. But the things at least the mistakes I made, I think they were head mistakes and not heart mistakes.
Right.
And head mistakes are when you don't think something through, when you don't take the time to, pause and get advice or something, you just snap judgment. Heart mistake is where you know what you're doing and you know you shouldn't do that and you do it anyway. That's a bigger thing. But I just remember that as I look back on those early years, there's some things that I did do right, and that was one. I faithfully preached the word. I loved the people regardless, and I showed up every day for work and gave it my best.
Yeah.
And John Maxwell says, we overestimate what we can accomplish in 2 years, and we underestimate what we can accomplish in 10 years. And, my track record of ministry, other than my first church, has been I've been at a place a long time. I was at when we went to Georgia, I thought I'd be there. I planned to go there and stay. I mean, I didn't plan to say, 4.5 years, I'm gone.
Yeah.
I was going there to stay forever. We went to Texas. We ended up staying there 17 years. Now we've been here 16. I don't like to move.
Right.
And fruit is only experienced through longevity. And I'm thankful that I've had a long tenure here, and I hope that I continue, that I have many more years here. I don't have any plans to leave. I'm not looking for another job.
Right.
I love what I do, and I would certainly want to see the things that the vision plan that God's given me and that I've told the church, shared with the church, I want to see that come to pass.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Well, before we go, I promise this is the last thing. I just want to get this on tape and on video.
Okay.
You have recently picked up something that you want to do, and you've challenged yourself to do something.
man.
I'm going to let you say it because now
you put it out on video.
it's on camera.
Yeah, it's
so-
like when you cast a vision. Now you're committed to it.
Yeah.
Held accountable.
Yeah, so I'm 60 years old, turning 61 here in the next couple of months, and I wanted to, in this decade of the next 10 years, I wanted to challenge myself. I enrolled in college to work on a master's, and when I started looking at the class, I said, forget that. Yeah, I think the first class that I was going to have to take for this particular master's degree was how to pastor your congregation. I'm like, if I don't know how to do it now, I'm in real trouble. So higher education, I haven't found the thing that I'd like to do higher education with, like a master's degree. So, I decided I wanted to learn to play guitar. So I recently purchased a guitar and been working on that every day. And so my goal is by December, I'd like to be able to play a song Christmas Eve with you and the band.
Absolutely. I welcome it.
It might be C, G, E. It might be
Got news for you. A lot of worship music is just that right today. But
So, but yeah, it's been fun, and I want to create some new pathways in my brain. I want to learn something new, and I've got musical abilities in me. I used to be involved in music when I was a kid,
Right.
And my kids are super talented.
Yes, they
music-wise,
are.
So it's got to be in there. They got
came
the
from
genes.
someone.
Came from somebody, and Angie's musically talented
She
too.
is.
But so I'm learning learning to do that, and so
I heard that this December.
It's out on tape.
This December, he is going to play something. We don't know what, but he's going to do something.
I'm going to play the Christian version of "Smoke on the Water" at Christmas Eve.
But it was fun. We'll just add jingle bells on top. Whatever you know how to play, we'll just add bells. That's going to be a Christmas song. But it was funny because Tori and I went over for dinner, and we
Tuesday night, yeah.
we opened the garage door, come in. We always come to the garage, open the door, and there's Pastor Johnny in the kitchen playing guitar. And I couldn't see that, okay? I'm in the garage still coming in. All I hear is Tori open the door and say, well, that's a sight I wasn't expecting to see.
And I'm standing there
Practicing his C chord or whatever.
No, I haven't got C yet.
Oh, not C?
I can't get this finger up on the string and without everything else buzzing. So I was strumming G.
That's awesome. And I hope you inspire people to, it's never too late or whatever. So very cool. Hey, thanks for being on this.
Yeah,
I
thanks
am
for having
sure you'll be back.
And one of the things that a goal that I do have is in the fall, I'd like to start doing, and we've had this discussion
Yes.
before, a weekly podcast called Restoration Moments, and like a 5 to 10 minute, just a quick podcast encouragement. So that's another thing that I want to start doing, and come fall, let us get past all the crazy stuff that's been going
Yes,
on in our
please.
life here the last month or so.
Yeah, but we'll be looking forward to that. It's going to be great. But thanks again for coming.
Thanks for having
Appreciate
me.
it.
And thanks for the Johnnyism jokes, and hopefully we can get that book published in 25
we'll get that out, sell it in the front lobby.
Be a hot seller.
Restoration Church bestseller.
Yeah, maybe that'll help us. pay
Our
off
first book is going to be Johnnyisms.
We could sell that and hopefully sell enough copies to pay off our mortgage.
There you go. That's how we'll do
I
it.
think there needs to be a section in the 100-year booklet with the Johnny.
And the page, if we have an extra page, we'll let Nicole know. Very cool. All right. Thanks, Pastor Johnny. Appreciate
Thank you,
it.
Aaron.
Thanks for listening, and be sure to follow Restoration Podcast on Spotify and Apple. If you're watching on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe.